So in this video, we're going to learn about the very basics of building a visionOS app. We'll build a simple app where we display the simple sphere in a volume. And by doing that, you learn about what the different containers are for displaying 3D content, the reality view, how Reality Kit is architected, and just the bare bones of visionOS so that you could get started building more complex projects later on. So let's get started building this thing. Great, so I'm going to open up Xcode, click on create a new project, make sure you select the visionOS option here, and then click on app. Click next. You can name it whatever you want, and the rest of the options, just leave it as it is. Click on next. You can choose where you want to save this project. Again, save it wherever you want, and then click create. Now this opens up a new Xcode project with some default code in. You have a window with the sphere showing and a hello world text, right? But we're gonna get rid of all of that. And here, instead of this, you should call a reality view. So reality view is essentially how you display complex 3D scenes in your visionOS app. It's essentially a container for 3D scenes. And the content guy essentially contains all the contents of your 3D scene. So let me explain that with an example. So say you want to create a 3D version of this image with some dynamic behavior, right? The birds are flying around, there's land, and there's probably some audio of the birds. So if you were creating this in a visionOS app, you would show all this in a reality view, right? And in a reality view, every single thing is an entity. Both visible and invisible things, they're all entities. So each of the birds here would be an entity, more specifically a model entity that's visible, has a mesh and a material. And say the bird sounds, they might be an invisible entity, right? Like an audio entity. And the grass, the land, the skybox and everything, they will also be entities. Everything in Reality Kit is an entity. Again, you got the scene and there's a bird entity, there's a sound entity and a land entity. That's just a brief overview of how Reality Kit is architected. Now going back to our reality view code. So here we got the reality view, which gives us the content guy here, which contains all the entities in our scene. At the moment, there's no entities in our scene yet, and we're going to add a simple sphere to this reality view and see what we get. So for that, what we need to do is first create sphere, and then number 2, add the sphere to the scene. So to create the sphere, I'm just going to simply do this with a computed property here, name this sphere, and this should return a model entity. Again, a model entity is a specific kind of entity, which has a mesh and a material. So to create the mesh, I'm going to say let mesh equals mesh resource. Let's generate a sphere and let's give it a radius of say 0.05. And then we're going to create a material. So let material, let's make it a simple material. We can give this material a color, say red, and then is metallic property, set that to true. Awesome. So now we got the mesh and a material, and we're going to create a model entity out of that. So let sphere entity equals model entity, and you can now see you can create a model entity out of a mesh and a material. So the mesh is going to be the mesh that we just created, and then the material is the material that we just created. Awesome. And now we'll simply return the sphere entity. Return sphere entity. Great. So this computed property will essentially give us a red sphere. So I'm just going to collapse this, and what we can do here is simply say let sphere equals sphere. And then you can simply add that sphere to the scene. So content dot add. So you can see this adds an entity to the scene. Simply add the sphere. Again, you don't really need to do this. This is redundant because this is a computer property. So I can just get rid of that here. This would be add sphere to scene. Great, so simple as that. So we got the content view. The content view essentially displays a reality view with the sphere that we want to show in the scene. Now, if we go back to the starting point of our app, again, this is the starting point of the app. It's named after your project name, Vision Hello World app in this case, and it has a main prefix right here like this, right? This is the app entry point. At the entry point of the app, we're showing the content view in a window at the moment. Essentially in a visionOS, there are 3 ways to render content, right? You can show content in a window, which is the flat 2D screen, or you can show it in a volume, which is like a bounded container where you can display 3D models or simple 3D scenes. Or you can have full-blown immersive spaces where you can display immersive experiences, right? Where all the other apps are blocked. At the moment, it's set to a window. So instead of the window, we're going to display this in a volume, right? Because we want a small bounded container to display the simple sphere. We can just change this window group. Then you can set this to volumetric. So the plain guy will just display this in a window, and the volumetric would essentially display it in a volume. And now we need to do one more thing before we run the app. Because we're showing this in a volume, we need to go to our info plist, this guy here, where we can set the app permissions and different configurations. Here you can see preferred default scene session role is set to a window. This is telling visionOS, hey, when the app first starts, they would be expecting a window, right? But that's not what we have at the moment. When the app first starts, we're showing a volume, right? So we need to change this to volume window application session rule. Now, if you hit build and run, you should see it all work. Awesome. So here you got essentially a volume, which is showing a simple 3D sphere. So that's just a very quick introduction to visionOS. You learned about the basics, what a reality view is, how everything in a reality view are entities, and you learned how to display some very simple 3D scene, in this case a simple sphere, in a volume. So that's it, and I'll see you soon.